Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. And we have a couple of different topics we want to discuss today. The first one is the ongoing Ukrainian offensive. The Ukrainians are continuing to try and broaden their offensive near Staromyrski and Urozhain. The Ukrainians attempted to expand operations on their left flank. It would be the Russians' right flank. That operation ended in failure. Russian drones were able to localize the Ukrainian armored vehicles that were operating to the east of Urozhain. Those vehicles were then attacked by Russian heavy artillery, and the Ukrainians sustained very, very heavy casualties in that operation. And that's just one incident that was acknowledged and reported by the Ukrainians, because it was captured on video for all to see, and the Ukrainian military had to acknowledge what had happened. But that is happening across the entire front. Again, the ability of the Ukrainians to have any sort of strategic success in terms of completing the initial operational plans of this offensive, again, have met with disaster because the Ukrainians don't have an air force. Now, there's going to be this knee-jerk reaction to supply the Ukrainians now with F-16s. The low IQ voter here in the United States, the low IQ politician here in the United States, in Western Europe, believes that providing F-16s to the Ukrainians will be some sort of panacea, in that the Ukrainians will then have some sort of air superiority, air dominance. And that's simply not going to happen. So who's giving the Ukrainians these F-16s? Well, it is going to be the Netherlands and Denmark. Essentially, Denmark and the Netherlands are going to be receiving brand new F-35 Lightning II stealth multi-role aircraft. So the Netherlands and Denmark each have about 24 or so older airframe F-16s that they were F-16As, ABs that received a midlife upgrade to Block 20s, which essentially made them comparable to a F-16C or D. Now, how many of these F-16s are the Ukrainians going to receive? These are probably one of the exact airframes that will eventually be deployed by the Ukrainians, and ultimately, very high probability, they will get shot down. Now, the question is again, how many? We don't know. We anticipate at least a dozen will eventually make it to Ukraine. Possibly the entire air fleets of both nation states, Denmark and Denmark and the Netherlands, could provide all of their F-16s to the Ukrainians. I mean, Denmark really doesn't have, nor does the Netherlands really have any overt threat that is going to attack them at this point in time. So they are in a position to hand over their aircraft to the Ukrainians. Again, these very F-16s. And again, midlife upgrades, older F-16s, still very capable. Are they of the Block 50 or the F-16I or that's used by Israel, or the F-16 Viper that is being now used by Taiwan and Greece. No, they're not. They're not those aircraft. But nonetheless, they're very capable aircraft. But how is the Ukrainians going to use these aircraft? How are the Ukrainians going to use these aircraft? Because right now, the Ukrainians, in terms of the way they are operating their very minuscule remnants of their Air Force, is to operate Su-24s. Again, these are ground attack systems. Okay, not designed, the Su-24 is not designed for air-to-air combat. The Ukrainians right now are not in a position to engage the Russians in air-to-air combat with their few remaining Su-27s or MiG-29s that they have remaining. But they're using these Su-24s at very, very low altitude. I mean, just a few dozen feet off the ground. They're flying nap of the earth, and they are then launching JDAMs and cruise missiles against Russian targets. So are they going to use the F-16 in the same manner? These F-16s, are they going to be flying these nap of the earth and releasing JDAMs and cruise missiles against Russian targets? Well, the answer to that is probably not. They may, but ultimately the reason that these F-16s are being transferred is that, again, these low IQ politicians have the thought process that a few dozen of these F-16s are going to give the Ukrainians the ability to challenge the Russians in the eastern airspace. They're going to be able to possibly engage Russian aircraft that cross into the far east of Ukraine and launch their cruise missiles, many of which, quite frankly, Russian aircraft are not even entering Ukrainian territory. They are able to launch their cruise missiles hundreds of kilometers from Ukrainian airspace. So they don't even enter the Ukrainian airspace. So then what? Are we then going to say that the Ukrainian F-16s are then going to enter Russian airspace and go after those aircraft? No, they're not going to do that. So then what is the purpose of these aircraft? And what is the biggest threat for these aircraft? What are they going to be facing? Well, they're going to be facing a variety of systems in eastern Ukraine. The first, the Su-35, and I should rather say the Su family, Su-35s, Su-30s, even the older Su-27s that have been upgraded. The Russians have hundreds of these systems, and they have the ability to fire beyond visual range missile systems. And that's a whole other subject. What missile systems will we be giving the Ukrainians to fire from those F-16s? Are we going to give them the AMRAAM? Are we going to give them something different? Are they just going to be equipped with Sidewinders? Sidewinder X? But then again, what's the purpose? Because those aircraft are going to get shot down, especially if they don't have BVMs, beyond visual range missiles, which the Russians have and they're going to use. Next system, MiG-31s. Now, these were designed to engage larger aircraft, AWACS, surveillance aircraft, but again, they carry very large radars. They can see deep inside of Ukraine, and they can launch very powerful, long-range, air-to-air, beyond visual range missiles. They do have the capability to intercept F-16s, especially at higher altitudes. Next, the Su-57. Not a lot of them out there, but nonetheless, the Russians have deployed these systems. They are flying in eastern Ukraine, and they're flying specifically over Russian territory, launching long-range missiles against Ukrainian targets. Is the F-16 comparable to this system? No, absolutely not. So again, a few dozen Ukrainian F-16s against what I've already talked about. And then finally, probably the biggest threat for these F-16s, especially if they go to altitude. And again, they're going to have to go to altitude to engage Russian aircraft, because remember, that is the purpose of sending the F-16s. Not so much as ground attack missions, because the Ukrainians already have that limited capability. The West could have sent other systems to the Ukrainians to hit ground targets. They could have transferred the ATACMS. But I believe that these F-16s, for some reason, that the low information politician believes that this is going to make a difference. And it's not. It's not going to help. It may make a little difference. Obviously, the Russians are going to have to expend resources to engage these F-16s, and they will. And then finally, the most probably the weapon system that is going to give the F-16 or any Western aircraft probably the biggest problem is this right here: S-400s, S-300s. Even in all probability, the S-500 has now taken to the field in Russia. And these are very long-range air defense systems. The Russians have the ability to, from Russian territory, use the S-400 to shoot down Ukrainian aircraft over the capital, Kiev. Now, do they have the capability to engage in some of the distances as reported earlier about the S-400? They made it sound like a super weapon. Probably not. Probably not. But again, it is definitely a capability that exists and will give the F-16 problems. So, and if you put all these systems together, S-400s, Su-57s, MiG-31s, Su-30s, 35s, 27s, and I talked about MiG-29s, MiG-35s. So this is what is going, this is what these F-16s have waiting for them. It is just not going to be like a light, switching on a light. Because the Ukrainians now have F-16s, it is going to change everything. Again, this is incremental and is continuing escalation of this conflict. And we're starting to see, obviously, with the Ukrainians attacking more and more Russian cities, converting S-200 air defense missiles into ballistic missiles and attacking Russian sites inside of Russia proper, deep inside of Russia, the use of Ukrainian drones and attacking Russian targets, it's continuing. And the war is escalating, and it will continue to escalate. And at some point, is something going to happen? Is something going to happen? What that something is, we don't know what that is quite yet. But it could. And we will all know it when it happens. And it won't be good. So we are going to continue to cover the conflict. Obviously, we're continuing to watch the remnants of the Ukrainian offensive in the south. We're continuing to watch the Russian offensive in the north near Kupiansk. And again, we will continue to monitor weapon shipments and other capabilities that are being sent to the Ukrainians. Again, ultimately, the F-16s may be going, but we want to look at what missile systems are being handed over to the Ukrainians with those F-16s. It's not so much the F-16s. What capabilities are we going to give those F-16s? Are we going to give the Ukrainians sniper targeting pods? There's other systems that you need to be looking at besides the F-16s, because it matters. So again, we are bringing you information you simply will not hear from the legacy media. We are providing you the truth. If you want to support the channel, please jump on to Patreon, go to the About section, hit support, super thanks, whatever you want to do, subscribe, have at it. As always, I depart, and I wish you a good day.